So for this talk, we got a sponsor for the talk because Philip Zimmermann, he's used to getting paid for speaking engagements. So we were totally fine with that because we wanted to get this guy on board. I tried convincing him to accept Monero. He downloaded Cake Wallet, sent him some test Monero. We might be able to get him to put show a QR code on the video if people want to send him tips. Here's Mr. Zimmermann right now. We're trying to get you going. Oh, here you go. We got you going. No, we're good. All right, are we good? Yeah. All right. We did it, guys. We did it. So, sponsored by DV Chain. They're kind of the guys you never heard of. But they're very big in the crypto space, and in particular the Monero space. They're liquidity providers. Okay, so they work with exchanges, big exchanges. I guess, I don't know, Bitcoin whales and Monero whales that need to move in and out of crypto. These guys are liquidity providers. So really interesting. I think we're hearing from one of them later today. I think he's going to be on one of the panels later today, right? I think we have him confirmed, which is super cool. We can talk more about that. But so they agreed to sponsor this, which is really cool. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been possible. I should also say our other sponsors, because I think everybody here knows who's sponsoring the conference. But our stage sponsors are, for those listening at home, Cake Wallet and Coin Cards. So really big, thank you to them. Otherwise this would have been a lot more risk than it already was. So they helped us out with sponsorships, and it didn't feel as risky as an endeavor. And they're tremendous supporters, particularly Cake, of the Monero community. Vic, I don't know if he's still here. He'll be back because he'll be on a talk later today. Tremendous supporters of the Monero community. So big ups to Vic, and we'll thank him again later. And then Coin Cards, it's a way to buy gift cards with Monero. A lot of the things we bought, the tent that's outside, we bought it from Home Depot with the gift card, right? We use Monero. All these signs. Actually, we didn't use Coins Cards for this. We convinced the guy, and we bought all our signs with Monero from a local Miami guy. But what's tremendous about them is they're offering a real utility and fulfilling a real need for getting into, actually using your Monero. So this talk, sponsored by DVCA, we got Philip Zimmermann. Mr. Zimmermann, thanks for doing this.
Hi, I'm just going to plug in the headphones here. I get a little bit less distortion probably from audio feedback. So just give me a second here. Okay, can you guys hear me? Perfect. Woo! Can you hear me?
We hear you. We hear you loud and clear. Yeah. So, Mr. Zimmermann.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is that yes mean that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I guess you can't hear you.
All right.
You can hear us very well?
Yes, there's a lot of echo on your side.
Okay, but is it good enough? Can you make it up?
Echo for me, but just there's something peculiar about the whole ambience of the audio on your side.
Okay, but at least you could hear it. Is it good enough?
It's good enough.
Is it?
Since I'm speaking, the important question is, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we hear you 100%. So I think we're good to go. If you can quickly give an introduction of yourself, explain, a little bit about your past, and in particular, your PGP journey.
Introduce me so that I don't sound too, self-aggrandizing.
It's all right. I've been talking about you for the last half hour. Trust me. Before we got you up and running, so you've been, fully introduced. Go for it.
Okay, so I'm Phil Zimmermann, and I've been working in this field for more than 30 years, more like 35 years, although nobody knew about me before 30 years ago. So mostly I've been interested in secure telephony and secure email. I had to do secure email first because the enabling technologies for secure telephony just weren't around. Nobody had broadband, for example, in the early 90s. So I had to wait another decade for that to become widely deployed. But I developed PGP, pretty good privacy, and it spread all around the world in 1991. And because of this, the U.S. government attempted to put me in prison because at that time it was illegal to export strong encryption. The reason why it was illegal was largely because of the events of the 20th century, where World War II was highly affected by cryptanalysis. The Allies broke the German Enigma code and the Japanese codes, and because of that, they shortened the war by a couple of years and saved millions of lives. And so the governments, especially the Allied powers, recognized that having the ability to cryptanalyze the enemy's communications was so important that they made it illegal to export strong encryption. But fast forward to the 1990s, and the internet was here. And the internet meant that everybody needed strong encryption, or else how could they do e-commerce? How could they do, as they move their lives more and more into the realm of, the internet? We had a natural right to privacy that came from millions of years of face-to-face conversations. And it was a right to a private conversation that was not so much enforced by law, but rather enforced by the laws of physics. So if you wanted to speak to somebody face to face, you could just do that with enough separation from other people that no one else could hear you speaking except the person in front of you. And so that's the way in which we evolved. And that's the expectations that we had, by our physical experience. And so if we wanted to preserve that, even after the arrival of communications technology, then we would have to use encryption. And so with the invention of the telephone more than a century ago, and the telegraph, we needed to have encryption. And in World War II, it was highly influenced by radio communication, and they had to have encryption for military communication in the field. So this is what shaped, the outcome of the war, and this is what gave so many of the World War II allies the expectation that they had to regulate strong encryption. But with the arrival of the internet, everyone else needed to have strong encryption, and that's why we spent the entire decade of the 1990s in a kind of a political struggle to change the laws to allow us to export strong encryption. Some countries even had domestic controls. The U.S. had just export controls, but the French had domestic controls. The British had a little bit of both. And also in the U.S., even though they didn't have domestic controls, there was an effort by the FBI to impose domestic controls. That was in the form of the Clipper chip. Perhaps some of you might have heard of that. They wanted to put this special chip in every phone that could encrypt your conversation, but the chips were manufactured by, essentially the government. And they had a unique key placed in each chip. And they had a vast database of these keys under the control of the government that they could use for wiretap purposes. And much to the surprise of the FBI, the invisible hand of the free market did not favor the Clipper chip. Nobody wanted to buy products that had the Clipper chip. Surprise, surprise. Who would have imagined that people would not be interested in purchasing a product that would rat them out to the government?
Mr. Zimmermann, I just want to ask a question here, just because I want everybody to have opportunities to ask you as well.
Yeah, I would like to get questions from the audience.
Yes. Go ahead.
I just kind of close the, I'm kind of on a
Please do.
role here. So we had to fight throughout the whole decade to make this happen. My own involvement was at its peak during the 3-year criminal investigation. The government tried to put me in prison for PGP. And we finally managed to prevail in that without getting indicted. But it still took several more years to change the laws, and they were changed in 2000. After that, we built up a technology infrastructure around the world that had strong encryption, ubiquitous. It was everywhere. It was in web browsers, it was VPNs, it was, in whole disk encryption. It was in the Tor network. It was, in all kinds of technologies that had embedded strong encryption. And it's been growing that way for the past 20 years. But now we're seeing governments push back and now say, well, they want to make it illegal to do end-to-end encryption again. And I think it's, we're going to have to mobilize to push back against that, especially with democracies collapsing all over the world. Democracies are under attack and becoming autocracies. We see it in Hungary and in Viktor Orban's Hungary, to a lesser extent in Poland, but they're moving in the same direction. In Brazil, in the U.S., we see it happening, and lots of governments around the world that were liberal democracies are becoming populist autocracies. And if we allow backdoors in our encryption for in a world where we're losing our democracies, we're never going to be able to organize politically to resist autocracy's rule, and we won't get the political traction. You see this in China. It's a surveillance state, and there's no meaningful political opposition. So the stakes are very high. We have to have strong encryption.
So well.
You wanted to raise some questions.
Yes, so well stated. I hope you could hear me. That was amazing the way you put it.
I can't really hear you.
Okay. First question. Can you hear me better like this?
Yeah, that's okay. Actually much more clear.
All right. Good job.
I have to call a PSTN number, a public switch telephone number. That's not end-to-end encrypted. It's encrypted all the way up to the gateway, the PSTN gateway, but after that it's not encrypted. But sometimes I'm interested in protecting myself in the place where I am. If I visit the Ukraine, for example, and I call a PSTN number in North America, then if the PSTN gateway is far away from Ukraine, then maybe that's good enough because the real threat is nearby if the Russians are intercepting. So.
All right. Does anybody have a question, guys? I have a lot of questions. Do you draw a distinction then between preserving the ability to communicate through speech using encryption that perhaps governments don't have the ability to surveil or spy on any way? The distinction between that and digital cash. Do you think digital cash should be as free and uninhibited as speech communication through the internet? Do you draw a distinction because of the reasons you were saying, such as sanctions?
Well, I haven't seen a good design for cryptocurrency yet that addresses all these problems. I would like to see a design with a smaller carbon footprint that still is secure as the proof of work. And I don't know how to do that. Maybe it's not. Maybe proof of work is the only way to do it. And I also would like to see. I'd like to be able to spend money personally as individuals, and have preserved personal privacy. But to have nation states be able to spend money. Nation states spend money, and I don't feel any great need to protect the privacy of how nation states spend money. Well, maybe for some classified, expenditures for the military or something, but nation states generally, I don't want them to evade sanctions. So if we had a cryptocurrency that was somehow, it's kind of like a low-pass filter, where smaller transactions that actual humans might use, then maybe if that's privacy preserving, but large billion-dollar transactions that that nation states might use would not have the same anonymity and sanctions evading characteristics. Now I know we don't have a cryptocurrency like that right now, but I think it would be interesting to see if it's possible to design something like that. Well, I'm so horrified by what's happening in Ukraine right now. The war crimes, the horrible atrocities, that I really am very, very interested in sanctions. And so, that's on my mind when I look at cryptocurrency. I try to think, okay, we're engineers. Why can't we as engineers try to come up with something that optimizes it for privacy preserving features for natural people, humans, but not for nation states.
Yeah, we have another guy.
Oh, hey, thanks for coming. I just had a question. Do you mind just going into a little bit about the process of publishing PGP and just really what that was like and where did that idea really come from? Obviously, it is just another language or whatever, but yeah, I would love to understand kind of that entire process because that was obviously incredible.
Well, it's quite a good story. I wanted to do something along those lines, going all the way back to the 1980s, but I was a peace activist back in the 80s, and so I was using my skills in data security to protect grassroots political organizations and human rights groups to protect their communications. And so I didn't really have time to do PGP in the 80s, but I did in the 90s. And I did it as a human rights project. It was my motivation. And I also thought maybe someday it'll make money, but right now the priority was to, I thought it was more important to approach it from a civil liberties perspective. And I started working on it. It took me about 6 months to get the first version out. I'd already worked on the components.
Mr. Zimmermann, just pause for 1 second. So the question was, this gentleman was asking basically what inspired him to equate code to speech and then pursue that as a legal argument, right? Essentially what the question was. And so he's telling the story as to why he went down that path, right? What that entailed. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Zimmermann.
Well, okay. My feeling about protecting the privacy of our speech, I felt my natural sort of instincts about speech was how we evolved. For as long as humans have had speech, for the past million years, that we've always enjoyed the ability to have private speech, private conversations. If you wanted to have a private conversation, you didn't need to use any kind of technology for that. You could just go talk to somebody. And if you don't want anyone listening, you go out and talk, go behind the bar and talk there, There wasn't any need to have the right to a private conversation in the U.S. Constitution because, 200 years ago, certainly well over 200 years ago, there was no technology that, speech wasn't driven by technology. Speech was just naturally between humans. And so they naturally already enjoyed privacy in their speech. It was built in. It was built into the physics of how humans talk to each other. There was no need to codify it in the Constitution. It was only after the invention of electronic communications about a century ago, with the invention of the telephone especially, that the need for recognizing the need for privacy in our speech, became important because it was possible to wiretap without our realizing. there was no way to secretly listen to our conversations before the mediation of electronic communication technology. Because if you saw anyone listening to you, see them standing right there, and you could say, we're going to go over there and have our conversation further away, where nobody can hear us. And so that's what I wanted to preserve. I felt that we already had that before these advances in technology took it away from us. So I wanted to restore that. The same thing about mail, when we all used paper envelopes, it was very labor intensive you couldn't intercept everyone's mail at scale. It was impossible. You could selectively target somebody to open their mail, and maybe you have to be careful how you open it. You have to open it surreptitiously. If it was in a sealed envelope, you might have to use steam to open the flaps and then read it and stuff it back in to make it stick again. Maybe they won't know you did it. And that's labor intensive. So you couldn't do it at scale. You couldn't do it with 50 million people all at once. And so that meant that the police, when it seemed worthwhile, like if they had probable cause to investigate somebody. My own mail was intercepted during my criminal investigation. And so, I didn't like that. But if they have to decide and they take it to a court and they have to do a whole lot of work, the labor, introduces friction. And that makes a qualitative difference. Because look at spam. Okay? Why do we have so much spam? Back in the days of postal mail, remember that postal mail? We had spam, but not very much. We had 10 pieces of spam every day at its peak? No more than that. Why? Because it costs money to buy postage stamps to put on the spam. And so anybody who wants to send spam in postal mail had to spend money to do it. The reason why we have 1,000 spam messages in our inbox every day is because it costs nothing. So when you eliminate the friction, it causes a qualitative change. And the same is true if you can have effortless interception of mail. If you can scan mail automatically for keywords or even recognizing the sentence structure and what it means, the semantic meaning, and you can do the same thing with phone calls, then it becomes too easy for prosecutors. In fact, artificial intelligence makes it possible that a prosecutor for an autocratic government can say, here, automatically intercept all the communications of everybody in this opposition party and see if any of them are breaking the law. And then we can go arrest them. And you can do that in an automated fashion, and that changes everything. So what I would like to do is to prevent massive, large-scale surveillance at scale. I would like to prevent that. And encryption does a good job of that.
Amazing.
So,
guys, any questions?
Yeah.
Say yourself. Go ahead.
Thanks. Mr. Zimmermann, may I call you Phil?
yeah.
Hi, I'm Chad. Phil, I was wondering, given all of the trucks that are needed to haul around dollar bills and coins, all of the security people, all of the bank computers and the federal networks and all the rest of the stuff, the enforcement, all the time spent in court dealing with all of this stuff, all of the everything involved. The military spends a lot of time on enforcing it. Can you compare? What do you think would be a reasonable comparison of the carbon footprint of the U.S. dollar to a worst case scenario of Bitcoin's proof of work? Keeping in mind, I think Monero is probably considerably lower given its limited economics of scale for mining by large.
Right. Monero is a smaller problem right now. I'm not too worried about.
Right,
I'm not too worried about the carbon footprint for Monero.
Right, but comparing Bitcoin to U.S. dollars, do you have a sense of how those things might compare in the future in your let's just say you have a crystal ball. What do you think?
Well, I heard you say, the cost of the military, but I think the military does a lot of things for us besides enable how money gets moved around. The military also protects us from Russian tanks.
Yeah, let's just take the piece of the military pie that helps enforce the U.S. dollar relevance and things like the petrodollar and all the rest of the stuff that's done. Because frankly, a lot of enforcement, worldwide enforcement of the U.S. dollar does fall to the military, and obviously that's not the lion's share of the military itself.
Yeah, I don't think of the U.S. military as largely oriented toward enforcing the attractiveness of the U.S. dollar. I think of that our use of the military over the last century has been, largely about we had a kind of an empire in the 20th century.
Yeah.
Especially during the Cold War after World War II, and we did a lot of bad things with the military back then. Now, after the Cold War, our military tended to be used more for things that are more good, like delivering food to Somalia or something like that. And right now, it's helping the Ukrainians protect themselves, and so I see the military, in mixed ways. It depends on what they're told to do. If they're told to do bad things, I don't like them. But if they're doing things that I want them to do, then that's good for all of us. Then I do like what they're doing. So I tend to look at, as I said, it's like this. These technologies have mixed effects, and the military also has mixed effects. It's not so much the fault of the military; it's the policies that assign the military to go and do things, to fight wars that maybe we shouldn't be fighting, like Vietnam, or the wars against in Central America. There would be military juntas that were kept in power by U.S. military backing. That was during the Cold War. So. I think I've gone off on too many tangents here, but what I'm trying to say is that I see the military in different contexts, and so some of it's good and some of it's not.
Well,
right now, the thing that's on my mind the most right now, I live in Europe, and I've been to Ukraine many, many times, and I've been all over the Ukraine, and it's not, they don't call it the Ukraine because that sounds like a region instead of a country. It's Ukraine. And I had engineers working for me in Ukraine. I went there many times to run an engineering project. And I see what's happening there, and it's absolutely horrifying. And it's the most important thing that's happened since World War II. And I think that we need to stop them. We need to stop the Russians in Ukraine. And if we don't, what's to stop them? I mean, it's tyranny. I mean, everybody in the cryptocurrency world worries about tyranny. Well, God, this is the worst kind of tyranny. It's mass murder on an industrial scale.
Okay, just a quick redirect on that. Wow, I sound like a lawyer. Please shoot me. I guess what I was actually aiming for was more your thoughts on the balance of cryptocurrency versus U.S. dollar in terms of carbon footprint.
Yeah, I think you were trying to compare the efficiency and energy usage, and I went off on this tangent. I'm sorry, I'm too often tempted by tangents.
I understand.
I do that.
Well, thank you.
I think that if you compare the energy usage with, say, Visa, MasterCard, I mean, it's thousands of times more energy intense per transaction. At least Bitcoin is. Yeah. And so, I just think that I think there is a way that it could be done. I mean, for example, imagine that you had a rooftop solar panel on your home, and you had one of these Tesla power walls, right? And the rooftop solar charges the power wall, the battery, and then you can sell that power later when there's more demand for it. Well, what if the power wall is full? You can't charge it anymore. It's at maximum. And the price of electricity at that moment in the day, which fluctuates according to demand, there's no demand for it, and the price, you can't sell that electricity to anyone. In that case, use it to mine Bitcoin or whatever or Monero or whatever you want to mine, because that energy is wasted. It can't go anywhere. You can't store it, and you can't sell it to anyone else. So in that case, why not do some cryptocurrency mining right on the spot? That would be wonderful. That would take away all of my objections on the climate change aspects of this.
Thank you very much, and thank you for PGP. It's a great gift to humanity. I still use it to this day. Thank you for your contributions.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more. Go ahead. You want to come up? I'm dying to ask a question, but I just don't have much time. I'll let you guys.
So, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Zimmermann. By way, kind of continuing some of your thoughts about the sanctions and whatnot, it's more of a comment / critique. What is the difference if right now we see a huge marriage between a lot of governments that are becoming autocratic, and many of them are in the West, and they're supposed to be the proponents of liberal democracy, but we see a marriage of them and big tech, and so we see the way technology can be used, and the way a lot of these groups can be co-opted by government and whatnot. What is the difference of that and what you were seeming to propose of a sort of role of encryption and PGP and crypto in creating or helping countries to avoid sanctions? Is there not there also a danger, if there's not certain parameters in place, of basically trying to create a system where the same autocratic entities could step in and use or co-opt that means for basically justifying their own policies or implementing their own policies towards one nation, therefore disfavoring other nations? Because the reason we see a lot of FOMO right now in other countries towards adopting Bitcoin as a sort of hedge against inflation is because of what's happened in Ukraine with Russia by putting these sanctions on Russia. Because we all know the World Bank and IMF will not. They basically run the show in terms of everybody's reserve currency. Most countries have their reserve currency in USD. So everybody's looking for an option. Is BTC gonna fill that void? You seem to be proposing a sort of alternative to BTC because of its deficiencies that would allow for such a system to be in place. That is, allow a governance to prevent the evasion of sanctions. So it's very difficult. I hope I didn't confuse you more, but
I have to say that your question is very difficult. Yeah. I'm not an economist, and so I'm a little bit handicapped here. I could try to speculate on things, but I don't have enough core expertise on the macro effects of trying to have exactly how do you design a cryptocurrency that meets all the needs. I don't know. I think it would be worth putting a lot of smart people together. And, people would...
Mr. Zimmermann, I just want to boil this question down too. So, but do you, on a philosophical level, how do you measure the two, right? So digital cash can be used to avoid sanctions potentially, but it could also be used, like you were saying, by, political minorities to make sure tyranny doesn't preserve in that way. Why are you giving more weight towards the ability to sanction versus the weight of the ability to freely transact and give political minorities the ability to prevent tyranny through that form? Aren't you considering them equally important?
Well, I'm very
or perhaps one more than the other.
I would very much like to have a cryptocurrency that preserves personal privacy and how people spend money. I think that before we started using credit cards, people generally bought things with cash. Sometimes they would write a check, but mostly that was too slow. So people walked into somewhere and with cash in their pocket, and they walked out with goods or services. And you know, I like that. I would like to restore that.
Last
And I
question.
think cryptocurrency could do that, or at least the anonymous kind, but like Monero or Zcash.
Last question. Do you think digital cash is ultimately inevitable? So we're talking about, you know, what it means for society, the pros and the cons, but as a technology, a decentralized digital cash, do you think its adoption is inevitable, or do you think it could be co-opted essentially at the end of the day by the state or some tyranny?
Well, certainly large states are trying to do that. I mean, China is trying to do that. And, you know, I mean, Russia is trying to do that. You know, autocracies are trying to do that, or at least some of them are. You know, they want to make their own state currency that way. And I don't know, that doesn't seem to bring any privacy. They're not designed for privacy. In fact, they're designed so that they can tell what everybody's doing with their money.
Right.
It's worse than credit cards.
Well, we greatly appreciate you, and this actually worked out really well. I think we were able to hear you, and for the most part, you were able to hear us. Thank you so much.
But, oh well.
Can we pay you for the speaker fee in Monero? No, you don't have to answer. You don't have to answer. We'll talk offline.
Okay.
All right, guys, we have another talk coming up, and it's going to be similar in style to this. We have somebody one person that's going to be phoning it in. It's going to be a round table. It's Haven, who's going to be virtual, and Thorchain, who's here, the physical, with Seth, who's going to be asking them a lot of questions. It's going to be great. Here he is. So give us like 2 minutes.
All right.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zimmermann.